August 12, 1940, RAF Hornchurch, Essex, England. The morning air hangs thick with the smell of high-octane fuel and cut grass, and across the dispersal area, young men, boys really, with faces still soft and unlined, lounge in deck chairs, trying to ignore the tension that coils in their stomachs like barbed wire. They are hurricane pilots, the tip of the spear defending southeastern England from the Luftwaffe's onslaught. Most are 22, 23 years old. A few are 19. They smoke cigarettes with trembling hands and make jokes about German pilots to hide the fact that half their friends are already dead. And then squadron leader Geoffrey Griffiths walks across the tarmac, 44 years old, moving with the careful deliberation of a man whose knees ache in damp weather. The younger pilots watch him with barely concealed amusement. They have nicknamed him Granddad behind his back, affectionately perhaps, but with an edge of condescension. The RAF forced him into retirement 3 years ago, citing age and declining reflexes. Only desperation brought him back. In the next 18 days, Geoffrey Griffiths will destroy 21 enemy aircraft, more than any other pilot in the squadron. They will stop calling him Granddad. They will start calling him the Reaper. Britain in August 1940 is a nation holding its breath. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force escaped Dunkirk by the skin of its teeth, abandoning tanks, artillery, and any illusion of continental defense. Now, across the English Channel, a strip of water barely 20 miles wide at its narrowest point, Adolf Hitler masses the Wehrmacht for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion that will either crush British resistance or break against it like a wave against rock. The deciding factor is air superiority. Without it, the Royal Navy will massacre the invasion fleet. With it, Britain becomes indefensible. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, promises Hitler that his air force will destroy the RAF in 4 weeks. It is not an idle boast. The Luftwaffe is the most formidable air power in the world. Blooded in Spain, triumphant in Poland and France, equipped with modern fighters and bombers, crewed by men who believe themselves invincible. Against them stands Fighter Command, undermanned, exhausted, flying aircraft that are sometimes magnificent and sometimes obsolete, led by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, a door tactician whom the Air Ministry considers too cautious and too old. Geoffrey Griffiths knows about being considered too old. He joined the Royal Flying Corps in 1916, flew Bristol F-2 fighters over the Western Front, survived 2 years of aerial combat that killed most of his contemporaries. He shot down 12 German aircraft, enough to make him an ace, though the term seemed absurd given the industrial horror of the trenches below. After the armistice, he stayed in the newly formed RAF, became an instructor, then a squadron leader, then a staff officer shuffling papers at the Air Ministry. By 1937, the RAF's new generation of commanders decided that 41 was too old for operational flying. Griffiths was thanked for his service, given a generous pension, and encouraged to retire to the countryside. He bought a cottage in Devon, took up fishing, and watched with growing alarm as Hitler rearmed Germany and swallowed Austria and Czechoslovakia. When Poland fell, Griffiths wrote to the Air Ministry volunteering to return to service. The reply was polite and firm. "Your offer is appreciated but not required at this time." When France fell, he wrote again. The reply was the same. Then came July 1940, and Fighter Command began bleeding pilots faster than the training schools could replace them. Standards dropped, age limits rose, and one morning, Geoffrey Griffiths received a telegram. "Report RAF Hornchurch immediately. Operational duty, Hurricane Squadron." His wife wept with fury and terror. Griffiths packed his kit and caught the train to Essex. The squadron receives him with a politeness that barely masks skepticism. The commanding officer, a wing commander of 33 who looks 50, assigns Griffiths to Blue Section and makes it brutally clear that he expects little. "You'll fly formation, follow orders, and try not to get in the way," he says, not unkindly. "These boys have been in combat for weeks. They know what they're doing." Griffiths nods, says nothing. What can he say? That he flew 78 combat missions in the Great War? That he survived the blood-soaked skies over the Somme when life expectancy for new pilots was measured in days? The wing commander was 6 years old in 1918. To him, Griffiths's experience is ancient history, as relevant as Waterloo. The younger pilots are more openly doubtful. They cluster around the dispersal hut, watching Griffiths struggle into his flight gear. The harness straps that seemed simple 20 years ago now require concentration, and exchange glances. Flight Lieutenant Bonzo Watkins, 24 years old and the squadron's top scorer with 9 kills, mutters something about old men playing at war. The others laugh, not cruelly, but with the casual arrogance of youth that has not yet learned humility. Griffiths pretends not to hear. He walks to his Hurricane, a Mark I with the serial painted on the fuselage, and methodically checks the aircraft. 8 Browning 303 machine guns, 4 in each wing. Merlin the third engine. Maximum speed about 320 mph in level flight, slower than the Messerschmitt 109 but more maneuverable at low altitude. The cockpit is cramped, the visibility poor, the controls heavy, but Griffiths spent 3 evenings studying the pilot's manual, memorizing every procedure, and his hands remember the muscle memory of flight, even if his body protests. The first scramble comes on his second day. The sector controller's voice crackles over the radio. Bandits, Angels 15, Vector 090. The squadron roars into the sky, 12 Hurricanes climbing hard toward the incoming raid. Griffiths flies as Blue 3, tucked into formation, watching the younger pilots with a critical eye. They fly aggressively, confidently, but also loosely, burning fuel and altitude unnecessarily, trusting in reflexes rather than tactics. They find the enemy over the Thames estuary, 30 Dornier bombers in tight formation, escorted by perhaps 40 Messerschmitt 109s weaving above them like sharks. The wing commander orders a head-on attack against the bombers. It is brave. It is aggressive. It is also exactly what the German fighter escort expects. The Messerschmitts dive as one, a coordinated killing stroke aimed at the Hurricane's exposed flanks. Griffiths sees it happening. The textbook maneuver, the same tactic he remembers from 1918, updated for modern aircraft but fundamentally unchanged. He breaks radio silence without thinking. Blue leader, fighters diving, 4 o'clock high. The flight lieutenant commanding Blue section snarls back. Maintain formation, Blue 3. Griffiths watches the 109s close the distance, watches his section leader commit to the bomber attack with single-minded determination. He has perhaps 3 seconds to decide. Obey orders and likely die, or trust instincts honed in a war these boys have only read about. The decision, when it comes, feels like no decision at all. He breaks formation. He climbs hard, throttle forward, turning into the diving Messerschmitts. The German pilots, focused on the Hurricanes below, do not see him until it is too late. Griffiths picks the lead fighter, waits until the 109 fills his reflector sight, then fires a 2-second burst. The Messerschmitt shudders, trails smoke, and peels away. Griffiths does not watch it fall. The second 109 is already on him, cannon rounds cracking past his canopy. But Griffiths is not flying like a 44-year-old recalled to service. He is flying like the man who survived the killing skies of 1917 and 1918, who learned to read combat the way a chess master reads the board. He chops the throttle, kicks rudder, and the Hurricane whips into a skidding turn that would black out a less experienced pilot. The Messerschmitt overshoots, and Griffiths drops onto its tail and fires. The German fighter explodes. Below, the squadron is in chaos. 1 Hurricane is already going down in flames. Another is pursued by 3 109s, the pilot pulling desperate evasive maneuvers that bleed speed and altitude. Griffiths dives, closes to point-blank range on the trailing Messerschmitt, and destroys it with a single burst. The other German fighters break off, fleeing east. When the squadron lands back at Hornchurch, the wing commander storms across the tarmac to Griffiths's aircraft. "You broke formation. You directly disobeyed orders." Griffiths climbs out, his legs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. "Yes, sir. And I destroyed 3 enemy fighters that would have killed half our squadron." The wing commander stares at him, then at the gun camera footage being developed by the intelligence officer, then back at Griffiths. "You're grounded pending investigation." He is back in the air 6 hours later. The Luftwaffe does not respect administrative inquiries. The psychological architecture of aerial combat is rarely discussed in polite company, but it is as real as the aircraft and weapons. Fighter pilots must cultivate a peculiar duality: absolute aggression in battle, absolute discipline in formation. They must be capable of killing strangers at 300 yards while maintaining the emotional distance necessary to watch friends die without collapsing. The young pilots achieve this through bravado, through jokes and nicknames and the relentless performance of invincibility. They are Bonzo and Tiny and Sprague, never David or William or John. They are characters in their own drama, playing roles that keep the horror at arm's length. Griffiths cannot play that game. He is too old, too worn, too familiar with grief to pretend that war is anything but waste. He does not joke in the dispersal hut or participate in the evening drinking sessions. He writes letters to his wife, reads technical manuals, and sleeps when he can. The younger pilots interpret this as aloofness, perhaps even cowardice. But then, they fly with him again. August 15th, 4 sorties. Griffiths destroys 2 bombers and a fighter. August 16th, 3 sorties, another 2 kills. August 18th, the day the Luftwaffe mounts massive raids against multiple airfields simultaneously, Griffiths' section intercepts a formation of Stuka dive bombers, attacking Hornchurch itself. The Stukas are obsolete, poorly defended, easy prey. Griffiths shoots down 4 in less than 3 minutes, methodical and merciless, then turns his guns on the escorting 109s and destroys 1 more. The intelligence officer updates his tally. 11 confirmed kills in 6 days. The nickname Granddad disappears. In its place comes something else. A respect that borders on awe, tinged with unease. The younger pilots begin to watch how Griffiths flies, how he conserves ammunition, how he uses altitude and sun, how he chooses his targets with surgical precision. They notice that he never takes unnecessary risks, never grandstands, never chases damaged aircraft beyond the point of tactical advantage. He kills efficiently, almost clinically, and then returns to base with fuel and ammunition to spare. Bonzo Watkins, the squadron's former top scorer, approaches Griffiths one evening. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Griffiths looks up from the letter he is writing. "I didn't learn to shoot. I learned to survive. The shooting is just what happens when survival requires it. Can you teach us?" Griffiths considers this. "If you're willing to forget everything you think you know about being heroic, yes. The battle is not fought solely in the air. Behind the scenes, a vast apparatus of radar stations, operations rooms, repair depots, and intelligence units sustains Fighter Command's ability to defend Britain. The chain-home radar network, a revolutionary technology that most pilots do not fully understand, provides advance warning of incoming raids, giving the RAF precious minutes to scramble interceptors. The sector operations rooms, staffed largely by Women's Auxiliary Air Force plotters, track raids in real time, vectoring squadrons into position with calm, precise efficiency. And in factories across Britain, workers labor in 12-hour shifts to repair damaged aircraft, manufacture replacement parts, and somehow keep the battered fighter force operational. Every hurricane that lands with battle damage represents hours of work by ground crews who are just as exhausted as the pilots. The difference is that the ground crews cannot become heroes. They can only fail or succeed in obscurity. Griffiths becomes aware of this ecosystem through small observations. The fitter who works through the night to replace his damaged engine. The armorer who personally checks every ammunition belt to ensure no stoppages. The weaf plotter whose voice guides him toward the enemy with mathematical precision. These people, he realizes, are as essential to victory as any pilot. More so, perhaps, because without them, the aircraft would never leave the ground. He makes a point of learning their names, thanking them, acknowledging their contribution. The gesture is small but unusual. Most pilots treat ground crews as invisible, part of the machinery rather than part of the team. Griffiths' acknowledgement earns him fierce loyalty from the men and women who service his aircraft. They ensure his Hurricane is always the first fueled, the first armed, the first ready for the next scramble. The wing commander notices. "You're making the other pilots look bad," he observes, not entirely joking. "I'm making them realize that we're not individuals fighting individual battles," Griffiths replies. "We're part of a system. The system survives, or we all die." It is a lesson the younger pilots absorb slowly, reluctantly, but they do absorb it. They begin thanking their ground crews, learning their names, understanding that every sortie depends on dozens of people they never see. The squadron's morale shifts subtly, less individualistic, more collective, less focused on personal glory, more focused on mutual survival. And when Griffiths shoots down his 15th aircraft on August 24th, becoming the squadron's highest-scoring pilot, he credits the ground crew before the intelligence officer has finished recording the kill. "That's not how this works," the intelligence officer protests. "Then the system is wrong," Griffiths says flatly. August 26, 1940. The battle has reached a crisis point. The Luftwaffe is targeting RAF airfields directly, trying to destroy Fighter Command on the ground. Hornchurch is hit repeatedly. Bombs cratering the runway, destroying hangars, killing ground crew. The squadron operates from a grass field nearby, living in tents, flying sorties from dawn to dusk, repairing aircraft in the open air while bombs fall in the distance. Griffiths writes a letter to his wife that evening, sitting on a crate of ammunition outside his tent. "My darling Margaret, I do not know when you will receive this, or whether I will still be alive to regret its morbid tone. Forgive me. I am very tired, and tonight the world seems particularly bleak. You asked in your last letter whether I regret returning to service. The honest answer is I do not know. I regret that my presence here causes you fear and sleeplessness. I regret that our life together has been interrupted by a war that should have ended 22 years ago. I regret that I am too old to have earned the right to refuse duty. But I do not regret flying. The young men here are brave beyond description, but they are children sent to fight a war they do not understand. They believe in glory and victory and the righteousness of the cause. I believed those things once. Now I believe only in survival. Mine, theirs, the nation's. If my flying keeps one more boy alive long enough to outgrow his illusions, then perhaps my return is justified. They call me the Reaper now. The nickname is meant as a compliment, I think, but it fills me with a cold horror I cannot articulate. I have killed 21 men in 18 days. 21. They were enemy pilots, yes, doing their duty as I do mine. But they were also sons, brothers, husbands, fathers. They had futures. I ended those futures with machine gun fire and incendiary rounds, and I feel nothing. Not pride, not regret, only a terrible numbness. I am becoming something less than human, Margaret, or perhaps more than human. I do not know which is worse. If I do not return, remember me as I was before this. Your husband, our daughter's father, a man who loved quietly and lived gently. Do not remember me as a killer, even if that is what war has made me." He seals the letter, adds it to the growing stack in his footlocker, and goes to sleep. The nightmares come as they always do. Fire and falling and faces behind canopy glass in the instant before impact. September 7th, 1940. The Luftwaffe changes strategy. Instead of targeting airfields, Göring orders massive raids against London itself. The first attack comes in the afternoon. 300 bombers escorted by 600 fighters, a formation so vast it takes more than 20 minutes to pass overhead. Fighter Command scrambles every available squadron, but the numbers are overwhelming. German bombs fall on the London docks, igniting warehouses full of rum, sugar, and timber. The fires burn for days, visible from 50 miles away, turning the night sky orange. Griffiths flies 4 sorties that day, his longest and most exhausting combat yet. The squadron engages repeated formations, attacking bombers from the flanks while trying to avoid the swarming fighter escort. Griffiths destroys 3 bombers and 2 fighters, but the victories feel hollow. Hundreds of bombers get through. The city burns. Civilians die. That night, sitting in the dispersal hut, Bonzo Watkins asks the question everyone is thinking: are we losing? Griffiths does not answer immediately. He is cleaning his guns, methodically swabbing the barrels, checking the feed mechanisms. Finally, no, we're not losing. But they're bombing London. They're making a mistake. Griffiths sets down the cleaning rod, meets Bonzo's eyes. Göring thinks he can break civilian morale, force Churchill to negotiate. He's wrong. The British people will endure anything except surrender. And while he wastes his bomber force on cities, he's not destroying our airfields or our aircraft factories. He's giving us time to rebuild. You sound very certain. I am certain. I've seen this before. Not this war, but war itself. The side that mistakes brutality for strategy always loses. The Germans could have won if they'd concentrated on destroying Fighter Command. Instead, they're bombing civilians and calling it a victory. He resumes cleaning his guns. We survive September, we win. Simple as that. The younger pilots absorb this with varying degrees of belief, but Griffiths's confidence, quiet, unshakable, grounded not in propaganda but in experience, steadies them. They fly again the next day and the next and the next. The Luftwaffe keeps coming. London keeps burning. Fighter Command keeps fighting. And Griffiths keeps killing. His tally rises. 25, 28, 30. He becomes the squadron's highest-scoring pilot. Then the sector's, then, briefly, one of the highest in all of Fighter Command. The newspapers catch wind of the story. Veteran pilot recalled from retirement becomes top ace. The BBC wants an interview. Griffiths refuses. "I'm not a story," he tells the wing commander. "I'm just doing my job." The strain begins to show. Not in Griffiths's flying. His skill, if anything, sharpens with each sortie, but in his body and mind. He loses weight, survives on tea and cigarettes, sleeps in fragments. His hands develop a persistent tremor. His hearing degrades from prolonged exposure to engine noise. A doctor examines him during a routine medical inspection and recommends grounding. The wing commander overrides the recommendation. We need him flying. Sir, with respect, he's 44 years old and has flown 63 combat sorties in 4 weeks. His blood pressure is dangerously high and he's showing signs of combat fatigue. I know exactly how old he is and how many sorties he's flown. I also know he's shot down 31 enemy aircraft and hasn't lost a single wingman. So unless he's medically unfit to sit in a cockpit, he flies. The doctor signs the clearance reluctantly. Griffiths overhears this conversation through the thin walls of the medical tent. That night, he writes another letter to his wife. Margaret, I think I am dying. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, eroding, like chalk cliffs under the sea. Each sortie takes something from me that I cannot name. Not courage. I have plenty of that, or perhaps too much stubbornness to recognize its absence. Not skill. My flying has never been better, but something essential, some quality that made me human rather than simply functional. The young pilots look at me with a mixture of admiration and unease. I have become a cautionary tale and an aspiration simultaneously. They want to fly like me, but they fear becoming like me. Cold, distant, mechanical. Perhaps they are right to fear it. I miss you with an ache that transcends words. I miss our daughters. I miss our garden, our cottage, the sound of rain on the roof and your hand in mine. I miss the man I was before I learned to kill with industrial efficiency. That man is gone, I think. Whether he can be recovered after the war, if there is an after, remains uncertain. If you receive this letter, it means I did not survive. Please do not grieve over much. I chose this. I returned to war knowing the cost. And if my death purchases even 1 day of peace for our daughters, then it was worth the price. He does not send this letter. Instead, he folds it carefully and places it in his footlocker with the others. 37 letters now. None mailed, all written. A chronicle of disintegration in his own hand. September 15th, 1940. The date will later be commemorated as Battle of Britain Day, the moment when the Luftwaffe makes its greatest effort and fails definitively. 2 massive raids, morning and afternoon, designed to overwhelm fighter command and force Britain to surrender. Göring commits everything. Heavy bombers, dive bombers, fighters flying as fighter bombers, every available unit thrown into one final climactic assault. Fighter command responds with equal totality. Every squadron in 11 groups scrambles. Reserves from 10 and 12 groups are committed. Even training units send aircraft and instructors into the battle. The sky over London and southeastern England becomes a 3-dimensional battlefield of unprecedented scale and ferocity. Griffiths flies 5 sorties that day, a physical feat that should be impossible for a man his age. His body operates on adrenaline and willpower, ignoring pain, ignoring exhaustion, ignoring the warning signs of imminent collapse. He destroys 6 German aircraft, 3 bombers in the morning raid, 2 fighters and another bomber in the afternoon. His flying is flawless, economical, surgical. There is no wasted motion, no unnecessary risk, no emotion at all. Between sorties, sitting in the dispersal hut while his Hurricane is refueled and rearmed, he notices his hands. They are shaking so violently he cannot hold a cup of tea. Bonzo sits down beside him, says nothing, simply takes the cup and holds it steady so Griffiths can drink. The gesture, small, wordless, compassionate, nearly breaks something in Griffiths. He nods thanks, unable to speak. The afternoon raid is repulsed with heavy German losses. Intelligence reports indicate 60 German aircraft destroyed, against 26 RAF losses. The mathematics of attrition have shifted decisively in Britain's favor. That evening, reconnaissance photographs show the invasion barges in French ports beginning to disperse. The wing commander assembles the squadron after dark. Gentlemen, I have just received word from Fighter Command Headquarters. The Germans are standing down Operation Sea Lion. The invasion has been postponed indefinitely. We have won. The silence that follows is not celebratory, but stunned, exhausted, almost disbelieving. Someone starts clapping. Others join. But there is no cheering, no exultation. They are too tired, too hollowed out. They have survived. But survival feels less like victory than like simply continuing to exist. Griffiths walks outside alone, stands in the darkness, and allows himself to feel something he has suppressed for weeks. Relief. He is still alive. The nation is still free. His daughters will grow up in a country not occupied by a foreign army. He permits himself 1 minute of grief for the men he killed to achieve this. Then he goes to sleep. The days following September 15th bring a strange anticlimax. The Luftwaffe continues to mount raids. Smaller now, primarily at night, focused on terror rather than military objectives. But the existential crisis has passed. Fighter Command, bloodied but intact, begins the slow process of rebuilding. New pilots arrive from training schools. Damaged aircraft are repaired. Squadrons rotate out of the front line for rest and recuperation. Griffiths' squadron is ordered to stand down on September 20th. They are relieved by a fresh unit from Scotland and sent north to Duxford for 2 weeks of recovery. The younger pilots celebrate, drinking and singing and engaging in the performative relief that comes with survival. Griffiths does not join them. He packs his kit methodically, writes a letter to his wife, this one he actually sends, and sleeps for 16 hours straight. When he wakes, the wing commander is waiting. The Air Ministry wants to see you. They're talking about a medal, the DSO possibly, and they want you for a publicity tour. Interviews, newsreels, recruiting drives. Griffiths feels a cold dread settle in his chest. No, it's not a request, Griff. You're the story they've been looking for. Veteran pilot, returned from retirement, top scorer in the squadron. The public needs heroes. Then give them someone else. I'm not a hero. I'm a killer. The wing commander sighs. You're also the most effective fighter pilot in this sector. 37 confirmed kills, 52 combat sorties, 0 losses among your wingmen. Those numbers matter. They're just numbers. They represent men who had families, dreams, futures. I ended those futures. That's not heroism. That's war. And I will not parade my body count for propaganda. The silence stretches. Finally, the wing commander nods. I'll tell them you're too valuable for publicity work. They won't like it, but I'll make it stick. He pauses. What will you do? Return to training command. Teach the next generation. Make sure fewer of them die because of ignorance or arrogance. Griffiths meets the wing commander's eyes. I've killed enough. Now I'd like to spend whatever time I have left helping people survive. You're grounded from combat operations effective immediately. The doctors insist, and for once I agree with them. You've given everything you have to give. Griffiths nods. He feels relief, and guilt about feeling relief, and exhaustion that transcends the physical. Thank you, sir. No, thank you. They shake hands. Griffiths walks out into the autumn sunshine and realizes, with surprise, that he is crying. The transition from combat to training duty is more difficult than Griffiths anticipated. His body, pushed beyond its limits for weeks, collapses into illness, pneumonia, bronchitis, exhaustion so profound he can barely climb stairs. He spends 3 weeks in hospital, and when he is finally discharged, he is 15 pounds lighter and looks a decade older. The doctors tell him bluntly that returning to combat flying would likely kill him within weeks. Griffiths accepts this with something approaching gratitude. He is posted to a fighter training school in Wales, far from the front lines, far from the killing. His job is to teach young pilots the skills they need to survive their first combat missions. He approaches the work with the same methodical intensity he brought to aerial combat, developing lesson plans that emphasize tactics over heroics, survival over glory. The trainees initially expect lectures from a decorated ace, stories of dogfights and victories. What they get instead is something more valuable: systematic instruction in deflection shooting, energy management, situational awareness, and the unglamorous discipline of staying alive. Griffiths does not romanticize combat. He describes it accurately: terror and chaos and split-second decisions that determine who lives and who burns. You will be frightened, he tells them during one lecture. You will be so scared you vomit in your oxygen mask. You will watch friends die. You will question whether you have the courage to continue. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of sanity. The pilot who feels no fear is already dead. He simply hasn't realized it yet. The students listen with an intensity that pleases Griffiths. They understand, perhaps, that he is not offering myth, but truth. Hard-won, blood-bought truth. One evening, a student pilot approaches him after class. Sir, is it true you shot down 37 German aircraft? Griffiths considers lying, then decides against it. 37 confirmed. More probably, but unconfirmed. That's incredible. No, it's tragic. 37 men dead because I was better at killing than they were. 37 families destroyed, 37 futures erased. He meets the young pilot's eyes. Never confuse military necessity with moral virtue. I did what had to be done, and I will carry the weight of it until I die. That's the price of survival. Make sure you're willing to pay it before you enter combat. The student nods slowly, sobered. Griffiths returns to his office, sits at his desk, and begins preparing the next day's lesson plan. Outside, Welsh rain drums against the windows, and for the first time in months, Griffiths feels something approaching peace. The revelation comes not as a dramatic epiphany, but as a slow, quiet understanding that crystallizes over the winter months of 1940 and 1941. Griffiths teaches, writes training manuals, corresponds with former squadron mates, and gradually begins to comprehend the true nature of what he accomplished and what it cost. He did not win the Battle of Britain. That victory belongs to hundreds of pilots, thousands of ground crew, the women who plotted raids and the engineers who designed radar and the factory workers who built Hurricanes and Spitfires faster than the Luftwaffe could destroy them. But he contributed something essential, proof that experience and discipline could compensate for youth's declining reflexes, that survival was not about fearlessness, but about intelligent application of force, that war could be fought with cold professionalism rather than hot heroics. The younger pilots he flew with survived in disproportionate numbers. Not all. War is war, and luck matters as much as skill, but more than statistical probability suggested. They survived because Griffiths taught them by example to fly smart rather than brave, to prioritize mutual support over individual glory, to recognize that every sortie required not just courage, but calculation, and Griffiths himself survived, though not intact. The man who returned from Hornchurch is not the man who left Devon. He is harder, colder, burdened by knowledge that cannot be unlearned. He has killed 37 men, probably more, and he remembers each kill with perfect clarity. The faces behind canopy glass in the instant before impact, the bombers trailing fire, the parachutes that opened and the ones that didn't. He will carry those memories until death, but he will also carry the knowledge that his return to combat saved lives. British lives, yes, but also, paradoxically, German lives, because the war he helped win in September 1940 prevented a catastrophic invasion that would have killed hundreds of thousands on both sides. This is the terrible arithmetic of war. Sometimes killing efficiently prevents greater killing. Sometimes the old warrior's return is not vanity but necessity. Sometimes the nickname the Reaper is earned not through bloodlust, but through the grim discipline of doing what must be done, accepting the moral cost and living with consequences that cannot be evaded or forgiven, only endured. Griffiths teaches until 1945, retires when the war ends, and never flies again. He has given what he had to give. Now finally he is allowed to rest. Geoffrey Griffiths returns to Devon in June 1945, to the cottage and the garden and the wife who has waited through 5 years of war. His daughters are grown now, working in London, building lives interrupted but not destroyed by conflict. Margaret takes one look at her husband and understands that parts of him are gone forever, not lost exactly, but transformed into something harder and sadder, and less easily reached. They rebuild their life together slowly, carefully, learning to navigate the silences and the nightmares. Griffiths gardens, reads, takes long walks on the moors. He does not attend RAF reunions or squadron gatherings. He does not speak about the war unless directly asked, and even then his answers are brief and factual. The medals, the DSO eventually arrived along with the DFC, remain in a drawer, unworn and unmentioned. His students, the pilots he trained in Wales, remember him differently. They write letters thanking him for saving their lives, for teaching them skills that made the difference between survival and death. Some visit, bringing their families, introducing their children to the man who ensured they had children to introduce. Griffiths receives them graciously but without enthusiasm. He is glad they survived. He takes no credit for their survival. In 1962, a historian researching the Battle of Britain tracks Griffiths down, requests an interview. Griffiths refuses initially, then relents when the historian explains that many records have been lost and oral history is essential. They speak for 3 hours. The historian asks about tactics, about specific engagements, about the experience of returning to combat after decades of peace. What do you want people to remember about the Battle of Britain? The historian asks finally. Griffiths is silent for a long moment. I want them to remember that it was not glorious, that we did not want to fight, that we fought because the alternative was worse, and that the men who died, British and German both, were not monsters or heroes, but simply men trying to do their duty as they understood it. And what about yourself? What do you want to be remembered for? Griffiths looks out the window at his garden, at the roses Margaret planted, at the life they have rebuilt from the ashes of war. I don't want to be remembered. I want to be forgotten. That's the privilege we earn by winning, the right to go home and never speak of it again. The historian publishes his book in 1964. It includes 3 paragraphs about squadron leader Geoffrey Griffiths, his age, his record, his nickname, nothing more, exactly as he wished.